Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to our Inside Scoop with Franziska and Eka. We are talking today about why boys should know things about periods and menstruation. And with us is midwife Bridget Lagros. She is from the New York Finger Lake region, and she's also the mom to a teenage boy. Welcome, Bridget.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And just so that you guys all know, Bridget is watching three births right now, so we might have a dramatic exit in the middle of this, and then we will just continue the conversation without expert advice.
So I'm going to start off saying the reason how this came about was I was hanging with three other mothers that were mothers of boys, and we started talking about periods, and they have boys in their 20s, and said that it never occurred to them to talk about periods with their sons, and their sons probably didn't know anything about periods until they were in their mid to late 20s and living with their first girlfriend. And I'm sure if they didn't know anything about it, I mean, I'm sure they learned in a health class, but I'm sure it was a huge eye-opening experience for them. So we have some questions for Bridget that I'm sure would love to tell us.
So besides the fact that there are so many boys not knowing anything about it and having a lot of misconceptions, but can you sum up for us why boys need to know about the female body, menstruation, everything with it?
First and foremost, research has shown that boys want this information. And I think by normalizing periods, by talking to boys about it, we reduce all kinds of stigma and shame that a lot of girls and even women associate with their periods. If they understand what their girl friends are going through, then perhaps we can increase that compassion level. We can reduce incidents of teasing and just in general kind of normalize what is a perfectly routine physiological process that half of the population experiences on a regular basis. I think it also helps them understand the importance of and the practicalities of safe sex and contraception when the time comes. Mm-hmm. If they understand how women's bodies work and how the menstrual cycle works, it can make that, it could kind of drive that point home.
Right. Now, you say they want to know about this, but at the same time, I think as parents, I hear this a lot of, I don't have boys, but that this is a topic that not only do parents feel awkward about approaching it, but there is also, it seems like the first reaction from boys is often like, to make jokes or to kind of, right, there is an awkwardness that is definitely to overcome when we approach this topic. So how can we do that?
And I guess I would ask why is it awkward? And why is the natural inclination to be grossed out and to make jokes about it and be uncomfortable about it? And I would say it's probably because of how the environment that they're being raised in, which is our culture is not terribly enlightened when it comes to things that have to do with women's bodies, right? And I think it's going to be kind of I think as moms of teenage boys, it's kind of on us to start to change that and change the conversation around it. I think how you approach it with your kiddo depends on your kiddo, and how they best learn and what your relationship looks like with them. A really good book that I kind of point parents to is called It's Perfectly Normal. And it's part of a series of sort of really age-appropriate conversations about sex and puberty, essentially. And It's Perfectly Normal is for age 9 to 12. And it's just a really good jumping off point for having a conversation with them. Another approach that I kind of like is to ask them what they know and use that as a jumping off point. And one thing I've learned...
Let me jump in there, because how do you deal with it? Because we know there are so many misconceptions, right? I was reading this BuzzFeed article a while ago, and like one of the things was that these two brothers were convinced that the period was one drop of blood, and that women were just like, they were like spending a week to catch this one drop of blood, right? So,
I did some looking when you mentioned that buzz thing, and there's just a treasure trove of misinformation out there that women are collecting from the men in their lives. That's just hysterical.
Well, I mean, you think of period like the end of a sentence, period.
I guess.
Literally a period.
Yeah. Someone also mentioned that their boyfriend thought that all women have their periods at exactly the same time. Every month at exactly the same time. We're all doing it.
What a disaster that would be, honestly.
But I think asking our teenage boys what they have heard, what are they hearing from their friends, and using that as a jumping off point.
Okay, so let's role play. All right, you just said to me, "Hey, what do you know about girls' periods?" Okay, I'm a teenage boy. Gross, mom, gross. So we have to talk about this right now.
And I would say, why do you think that it's gross?
What Mom, it's like blood coming out of like a girl. Yuck.
Right, but it's that blood is really important because that means that girl can someday have babies. And that's a really beautiful, miraculous thing.
Okay, Mom, you know what? I understand that, but you're a girl. So now I'm really grossed out thinking about that this is happening to you.
Well, I don't think it's gross at all. It's something that happens to every woman every month, more or less. And there's nothing gross about it.
Now, that would be great. And so now if I were that mother, I'd be like, and you know what? I'm going to keep talking to you about this until you stop getting grossed out and you realize it's a part of being a human. And that's
what a normal bodily function.
Yeah. I've found that by almost desensitizing my kids about things that they thought were gross, then it starts being normal and it's not so gross anymore. So is that a good suggestion to do?
Sure.
Kind of bringing it, not like every day for months.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, don't beat a dead horse, but and I found with my own kiddo that short conversations are best. I went into this whole parenting thing thinking that we were going to talk about, all the things and that it was going to be really long conversations. And that's not how they work. It's really small conversations. Even just last night, I was FaceTiming with my son, and he knows that I'm doing this today, and he thinks it's really cool, for the record. And I just kind of asked him, we had maybe a 5-minute conversation again about misconceptions. And he hadn't heard anything, at least not anything that he was admitting at this point. But I've learned with him that short conversations, and often while we're doing something physical, is best for him. Shooting a basketball, something like that.
Do you have the feeling that boys amongst themselves talk about this at all?
I was trying to get at that with him last night, and he says no, but they're 13. So maybe it's a little on the young side. I don't know.
Right.
Okay. So now what kinds of, 3 to 5 things do you talk about in this conversation?
That is a normal bodily function. Normal. That they're different for everybody. So one woman might have 0 cramps, light bleeding, 3 days out of the month, and it's just no big deal. And other women could be completely incapacitated, and both experiences are legit and valid.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what kinds of misconceptions have you heard? I mean, let's just talk about men, not even boys. What misconceptions you heard about men that they have about women's periods and their bodies?
That period blood can be held in like urine. so you can kind of control when you when you go.
Well, wouldn't that be a gift, huh? I mean,
Yeah.
I think every female has a horror period story, you know, something that was horrible that happened to them. Like, and if we could hold that in, that would be a great day.
Yeah.
Right?
I almost feel like these misconceptions can be great icebreakers.
Yeah.
You know, to
Yeah.
almost say, "Hey, I've heard that this is going around. Have you ever heard about this?" You know, and
Mhm.
you know that really what is happening is X. You know, but
Mhm.
I think that
Yeah.
can sometimes be a good starting point to kind of
Especially when they're funny
yes.
and you can kind of break the ice with humor. At least that works with my kiddo.
Yeah.
There's a movie, I've never seen the movie actually, but it's called Anchorman and it's got Will Ferrell in it.
Mhm.
And I guess that some dialogue in that movie referred to being afraid to be out in the woods with a woman when she has her period because it's going to attract bears.
Mhm.
And that maybe, you know, it could attract sharks if she's swimming in the water. And that's out there now, you know? Like,
What? It's not true?
not to the best of my knowledge. But I think that's it's kind of sad, but it's also hysterical, right? And so, you know, boys and humor, that works.
Well, you know, there recently, I think last week, you okay?
Yep.
Last week there was a golf thing. I don't know if you read about this. There was a golf thing where two professional golfers were playing golf and they both were doing a drive. And the one who hit the longer drive turned to the other one and handed him a tampon. Did you hear about this?
No.
Tampon,
Why?
basically saying you're the girl. You had a shorter drive, and here's a tampon.
Oh,
So you know, so I mean, it's 50-something year
wow.
old or 40-something-year-old men with something that's like a 12-year-old boy joke, right? So we're hoping that hopefully men grow out of this. Yes, I know.
Yeah, they
I
do.
told Francisca the story yesterday. She was looking it up. She's like, "That did not happen." I go, "Oh yes, it happened. It was yeah."
That's
So
a lot to unpack in terms of like the different layers of misogyny there, which
right,
may be beyond the scope of this
right. But I mean,
talk.
that our aim is to not have our boys think that this is the kind of thing that goes over well. I guess with because I just thought it was so horrible, especially the man who did this has daughters. So
Yeah.
I guess we want better for our girls and our boys
For sure.
than that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we
You
sure
know,
do.
speaking of tampons, would it make sense to actually introduce boys to the different, you know,
Yeah.
things that we use?
Yeah, like that was one of my points on the top 3 to 5 things
Oh,
was
okay, sorry,
to
we
talk
skipped
to
over that.
them about what are the different ways that women kind of manage that bleeding, right?
Mhm.
And you know, you got your tampons, you got your pads, you got your diva cups, you got your period pants, you know, like the Thinks underwear now. And to just kind of normalize that too. Because these are
Right.
things that, you know, that are going to be around the house and, you know.
Well, we are posting today an article about first period kits, so maybe people should get them also and share them with boys and tell them about it. You know, that might be
Yeah.
a good idea. So I think Becca, you know, Eka's story about the golfer is like a great example about society kind of still having so many ideas about, you know, women and periods and what that means to their, you know, life and everyone's life. So how can not only we contribute to make this better, but help equip boys to kind of not continue that pattern?
I think the first step is normalizing periods and making sure that they understand it's a normal bodily function that half the people in the world experience. There's nothing impure, unclean, gross about it. Um, it's just how women's bodies function. I think that's the number one. And then raising boys that respect women. and it's understanding periods and being compassionate about, women's lived experiences. That's one thing. But I think it's part of a bigger conversation about how we're raising our boys to respect women.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
No, what else can you say about that, right? That's it. That's it.
I mean, that's it in a nutshell, right? How do you go about doing it? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying my best with my 13-year-old. I think I'm doing okay,
Yeah. And you know what? And maybe, him being in a position where he knows facts and he knows what it's about, then at some point, a bunch of boys could be talking and he could be like, yeah, guys, no. I mean,
that's my hope.
Empowering him to know facts. Because maybe a lot of times it becomes a joke because you don't know any better.
Right.
So you don't know. So maybe knowing and being empowered with that, you can now stand up confidently and say, no, that's not the way it works. Because I think it's hard to stand up and say something when you really don't know what are the true facts. So maybe that's what happens.
I hope he would do that in that setting. I think he would. I certainly hope he would. He's pretty proud ever since he's been a little kid. So I was invited to go back to his early childhood education to that school. They go through 8th grade, but I was invited to come back and teach a couple classes on sex ed, essentially. And he was very proud of that.
That's great.
And, he's got all the, It's Perfectly Normal, that whole series of books. He's got them all. And I think he's kind of proud of the fact that he knows stuff that maybe other kids don't know. And I'd like to think that he shares it.
Yeah.
So if you want to give parents who, haven't done that yet and they want to start today with one small step, what's your tip to go? How do you break the first little bit of ice?
Ask them what they know. Ask them what they've heard. That would be my first tip, because you don't want to launch into a big lecture, and I'm guilty of it as anybody, but my uncle is actually a retired child psychologist, and I had asked him at one point about how to broach something with Kyle. I can't remember what it was. It was a long time ago. And he said, ask him what he knows. And I thought that was really simple and really brilliant. And I've used it ever since then.
Yeah.
So ask them what they know. Ask them what they've heard. Ask them what questions they have.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's so simple but so powerful.
And also importantly is that we do need to talk to our boys about this.
Yeah, and meet them where they're at. Don't come in kind of loaded for bear sort of a thing, but just figure out where they're at and meet them where they're at.
Okay. Great advice.
Well, thank you so much, Bridget, for joining us today. And yay, nobody had to call you into an emergency, but
no. No, I actually would have bet money that I was going to get a call. It's been a very weird morning around here. Very weird. And yeah.
Well, thank all the new moms that they waited for us to finish this interview before they went.
I will do that. I will do that. And the nurses are, they're great. But I really thought that I was going to get. I had to run for a baby 2 weeks ago. The nurses shouted out for me, and I actually had to run, and the head was out already. Oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, they're going to kill me if that happens again today.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for enlightening us about what to do with our boys. I mean, we're always looking to do as much as we can to raise knowledgeable, empowered kids, and this is another brick in that that we're trying to build for them. So
yeah. Thanks for having me on. It was fun to chat with you guys.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for joining us out there.
All right, keep it up out there. Keep educating those teens, you guys.
Right. Bye.
Bye.